Hi, I'm Elizabeth Bowman and welcome to the Scene Room. Today I have Alexander Brose here. He is the Michael and Sonia Kerner President and CEO of Canada's The Royal Conservatory based in Toronto. He has over 25 years of experience working in the performing arts and education sphere, and most recently he was the inaugural Executive Director and CEO of the Tianjin Juilliard School in China. I'm really excited to talk to Alex about his vision for this incredible institution. Alex, welcome to the Scene Room. Thanks for coming.
Hi, great to meet you.
You're the new, you came to the Royal Conservatory last year, and then you did a year of overlap with the previous president, Peter Simon.
That's right. Yeah. So I arrived here in Canada, I guess it would have been August of 23. Yeah, had a couple of days to get settled in our new place and the kids into school, and then began a year as president and CEO designate, shadowing Peter, trying to really just see what it is that he's built or he had built over the past 33 years, which is pretty remarkable. And yeah, it was a year-long overlap, and then I became officially president and CEO just this past September. But the year of overlap was a very unique situation, pretty unorthodox, frankly, to have a president designate there for an entire year. And I think was unbelievably helpful for me. I mean, just an incredible luxury, in fact, to be able to be here, but take a bit of a step back and observe and listen and really start to absorb just the influence that this institution has across Canada in everyday lives of children and teachers. It's just pretty overwhelming. So it took about a year to figure that all out. It's just remarkable.
That's a really great model for other institutions to take on board because of all the institutional knowledge that you must have acquired throughout the year with Peter.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I obviously highly recommend it. I think it's a two-way street, right? It takes two people to make it work, for sure. And Peter and I have just the utmost respect for one another, got to know him exceptionally well and just think the world of him. But yeah, I would absolutely recommend it if it's possible. I just think having access to that institutional knowledge, and not just from Peter, I was actually able to take a pretty big step back and offer time up to really any member of the staff or faculty who wanted to sit with me and chat for 15 minutes at a time. And it's something that I did when I was in China, when I was building something from the ground up with the Tianjin Juilliard School. Every new hire would come into my office for a little bit during their first week, regardless of their position, just to introduce themselves. I could introduce myself, the mission of the organization, just so that we were aligned and on the same page. Obviously, it's a much different situation doing it for an organization that's been around for 135 years, but it was incredible to sit with people, and I sat with about 190 of them over the course of a year, to sit with people whose history and relationship with the organization is 70 years long.
Wow.
I mean, they're teachers who have been here for over 50 years. And those teachers who have been here for over 50 years probably went through the conservatory curriculum and exams prior to that. So, a 74-year-old teacher here has a 68-year relationship with the organization. That is so unique, and it just doesn't happen anywhere. And I think I knew that was a possibility upon arrival, but it really started to hit me as these conversations continued, just how kind of ubiquitous this institution is for musicians in the country and how close they feel to the institution.
Yeah, it has a very unique position in Canada. I also went through the conservatory system with music theory, singing, and also my piano. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very unique for an institution to touch so many across an entire nation, mm-hmm. and also be a bustling Toronto hub as well.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I've said it over and over again over the past year plus, but I really don't think there's any other conservatory like it in the world, to have these kind of 5 aspects of the organization all related and all encompassed within one brand, right? From the 3 schools that operate here on the campus, the Glenn Gould School, the Taylor Academy, and the Oscar Peterson School, but then the learning systems, which is what we call our curriculum, our books, our exams, our digital training, our teacher certification program, our early childhood program, and then Kerner Hall. There's really nowhere like it. So it also puts a lot of pressure on us to do a lot of things and to be a lot to a lot of people, particularly as the music and the public education systems in Canada continues to kind of be reduced in many ways. It puts a lot more pressure on us to fill that vacuum.
Can I rewind a little bit and find out a little bit about where you came from, your formative years, education? How did you get to where you are right now? Let's start at the beginning.
Music has always been a part of my life, and I have 2 parents who are, although not musical, I think that they both have musical talent. Music was always in the house, for sure. I actually was really lucky to have the opportunity to grow up overseas. I was born in New York City, but at the age of 7, moved to South Korea. And it was really there that I started to sing and to be musical. And I was cast in a production of Tom Sawyer in grade 4 at the Seoul Foreign School. And it was an amazing opportunity. I began to see, even at a very young age, just how much music can connect people and serve as a cultural bridge. I mean, here was a kind of a tow-headed blonde kid singing Tom Sawyer with a largely Korean cast, right? It was just an amazing opportunity. And that actually led to being able to be on Korean television, kind of a Sesame Street-esque show teaching Korean kids how to speak English through music. And so again, just having that very early exposure to really what the power of music is, not just in terms of performance and beauty and all of that, but real connection and as a tool for learning. Anyway, so I spent many years in Asia and came back to the US, went to university in upstate New York, really struggled between wanting to either be a music major and something else or a something else major with a music minor or whatever. I ended up majoring in Asian studies with a concentration in China. Given my experience in East Asia after South Korea, I was in Hong Kong, so had early introduction, even though it's a Cantonese speaking city and country, into Mandarin. So Asian studies major, concentration in China, but I was just more of a musician than a student, taking advantage of everything that Cornell University had to offer. Knew that music would always be a part of my life. Didn't know how at all. I don't think anyone really truly knows what they're going to do when they graduate from college. I was lucky enough to work for Cornell for a couple of years out in San Francisco, and then found a job at the San Francisco Conservatory, which is America's oldest West Coast conservatory of music, going through a major transition from a very old building out in a very kind of older section of San Francisco into a new multi-million-dollar home in Civic Center. And so leading the admissions process there for many years, then going on later to development and fundraising, was just an incredibly formative experience for me, working in a terrific city with faculty from the San Francisco Symphony, chamber musicians, including Canadian Bonnie Hampton, who just are kind of at the forefront of chamber music. It was just remarkable. Yeah. Wow. So got into music education soon after I graduated from university and kind of never looked back.
It's amazing to see how people in senior roles like yours end up there. And there's usually a link in childhood to music.
Oh, yeah.
In the arts.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I was also very fortunate. The town that I grew up in outside of New York City, just at public high school, had just a remarkable music and theater program. I mean, just an unbelievable program with numerous choirs and orchestras and bands, and a theater company called the New Players that I was involved in that did 9 productions a year, including 3 musicals, right?
Wow.
It's just unbelievable, right? So being a part of that community, right? Being a part of that kind of arts community at a very early age, I don't know, you become very attracted to it. It just kind of becomes a part of who you are, and it becomes a part of who you want to surround yourself with, just to be around artists, to be around creativity, to be around beauty. Yeah, it's hard to say goodbye to that.
That really underscores, again, looping back to the conservatory, the importance of your role in Canada and in music education, because of course all these programs a lot of them are getting cut and kids aren't exposed to the same things. And it's so important to expose them young. Otherwise we're going to lose our audiences, which is obviously the big thing we're all fighting for within the industry right now. What is your long-term vision, your ideal vision for the conservatory as the new president?
It's a pretty big question.
I know.
Yeah. So, I mean, as I've said, I mean, the conservatory is a kind of a wildly complex institution, right? It has its hands in almost every aspect of music making, music learning, and music teaching. It is all things almost to all people. And, I think looking ahead and looking about how this institution positions itself, not only in Canada, but globally, is a, multifaceted conversation with many, many different directions. I think one direction that we are very interested in going is actually younger. And to your point, building the future audience goers, building the future instrument learners, building the future music teachers, but also building future scientists, building future engineers, building future writers and actors and politicians and lawyers and everything in between is something that I think music can and should have its hands in. And so we, in our building here in Toronto, this gorgeous building, for the past 10 years, we've had an early childhood program here that was the result of Peter Simon's vision of really connecting just how important early childhood music study is to teaching learners how to learn, right? And all of the studies that have been shown, and we've known for a long time that early access to music study opens the synapses, the neural pathways in terms of really building a platform for better literacy and numeracy and IQ and problem solving and language learning and all of those things that are important cognitive functions for us in life. So this program called Smart Start starts at infancy. I mean, you can have a 6-month-old and join a class here with a trained Smart Start teacher. As a parent or caregiver, you would be sitting in the class until the kid is 3 years old. And then after that, the kids are in the class themselves with a teacher until about 6. And the longitudinal studies that we've conducted looking at the performance of these students, these graduates of Smart Start, in terms of those upticks that I just mentioned, is truly profound. We can't claim causality, but we certainly can say that early introduction to music kind of makes kids spear. It's just an amazing thing to see these young children enjoy music and having it be introduced to them at such an early age.
I can see it in my own children. I have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. And of course, they're in a very musical household with their father is a violinist. And my life has always been centered around performing arts, even as a communicator. But it's amazing to see them learn focus and learn these things. But it is a fun way to learn it and to see their brains getting trained in that way. Also, I was reading Alex Sarian's book, The Audacity of Relevance, recently. Sure. Great book. I'm actually going to have him on the podcast too. He talks about this issue as well, the importance of having them in the theater before some very young age. Maybe it's before the age of 5 or 6, you know, for them to experience some type of performing art while they're young. Statistically, it will translate into them being theater lovers or ballet lovers or art lovers throughout their lives. And it usually bleeds into the other arts too, because once you are doing music, you can then appreciate music history, and then you can appreciate, you start wondering, like, why was this piece written? Oh, it was a political movement. And then next thing you know, you're into politics and and then art. And then
what was your first show? What was the first thing you saw that you remember?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. I grew up in Ottawa. It was probably The Marriage of Figaro. That's my mom's favorite opera. So I feel like I that was likely the earliest one. The earliest one I was in was Falstaff. And that was
really?
Yeah, I was in the chorus.
Yeah.
And I was like a fairy nymph or something, you know, and that was mesmerizing, you know.
Totally. Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the first things I ever saw was maybe Annie or something on Broadway, or maybe it was a Nutcracker or something in New York City, which, you know, is always so incredibly exuberant. But I actually grew up in Cooperstown, New York as well. And so my first time on stage was as a small kid in Madame Butterfly in a Glimmerglass opera production.
Wow. Yeah, exactly.
Makeup and wig and everything else. And so you just like that smell of hairspray.
Yeah.
Whenever you smell it, you're like, yep, I remember that from when I was 5.
Yeah. I did grow up in church choir environment, which was very involved. And there was a men and boys choir and a girls choir. And I was head chorister and all the things. And my brother was head chorister. You know, it was.
My mom and I sang in a church choir together.
Right. Exactly. I mean, these things translate to a love of music throughout your life and general happiness and well-being too. Right.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Since I'm a communicator, I'm fascinated by communications. And the past 10 years, things have changed in the scope of communications for all arts institutions, and likely the conservatory as well, with arts journalists dwindling and opportunities to get your message out there, less opportunity to do that. Owned media has come up. What's the importance of owned media for you?
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, owned media for us means a ton of different things. We are sitting on tens of thousands of hours of not only performances that take place in Kerner Hall, streamable performances, things like that, but also content of recordings of our books. I think maybe even Ben has probably played on some of them for our books. I mean, we have all of these wonderful recordings so that our students who are studying the RCM curriculum can go online and hear the pieces that they're playing, right? It's an incredible resource. thousands of hours of content. And for us, it's a question of kind of what we do with it, right? How do we make it more accessible? There's always, I think for those who may be listening who were studying the RCM in the 80s or something like that, right? They would buy the book, yes. And there was probably a CD tucked into the back of it, right? And you could go and you could listen to the pieces and everything else, right? I actually found one of those books at Along and McQuaid recently, trying to buy a saxophone book for my younger son. And I picked it up. Why is this so heavy? There's a CD in the back of it, obviously an old copy, right? But that does say something, right? How are people consuming content these days? How are people buying books? What can we do to make it more accessible for people? Do we digitize our curriculum? Do we digitize our books? That's digital replacement in a way, but how do we transform what we're doing through the digitization of our books and our curriculum and all of those recordings, right? Why isn't there an Apple Music channel for RCM where you can go on there, regardless of whether or not you've bought the book? Maybe you're a level 7 pianist or a level 5 violinist and you want to listen to those tracks. You go on there and there they are, right?
Yeah.
There they are. So we're really talking about what it means for the RCM to transform digitally, what the resources are going to be to allow for that to happen, because it's a heavy lift. It's a heavy lift to bring an institution that has been here for 135 years, performing very well. We're doing great things, but to bring it into even the 21st century is a tall order.
Yeah. I always loved about the RCM books. I loved how they divided up the repertoire.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have your Baroque stuff and then, you're moving into classical. Like, it was always organized in such a way that really allowed the student to understand the way music has grown through the years.
Right.
So you don't even know that you're studying that, because as a student, you're like, oh, I just need these contrasting pieces. It's from the A list or the B list or the C list. You know what I mean? But then you take a music degree and you study all the periods, and then you're like, oh, I see what they did there.
Yeah. Well, so it's so funny you say that, Lizzie, because one of the stories that I've told kind of repeatedly over the past year or so was an experience that I had when I was working in San Francisco at the conservatory there as director of admissions. And I was sitting in my office one day and I got a knock on the door from our lead music theory and music history teachers. And they had just completed their placement exams for the year. And at the time, we were actually getting a fair number of Canadian applicants and Canadian students who were matriculating and enrolling at the San Francisco Conservatory because of a couple of different faculty who were recruiting heavily at Mount Royal and other programs throughout Canada. And they came into my office and they said, Alex, do you have any idea what's going on in Canada? And I said, no, why do you ask? He said, well, every single Canadian student has passed out of our theory and our history exams, and we don't know what's going on. And a very minor dip of the toe into trying to figure that out resulted in Royal Conservatory of Music, right? They had all gotten their ARs, or they had all passed level 10, right? And they had all gone through that rigorous theory and history curriculum side by side. The performance curriculum and practical curriculum which is really an eye-opening thing for me to see that. And it's continued. Since getting here, just seeing just how kind of holistic the music education here is in Canada and how really comprehensive the understanding of classical music here in this country and why it's just been great. Yeah.
I remember taking the top level of the music history exam for the conservatory. And I think I was in grade 10 in school at the time, and so far off from my university days. But really, I was young and studying basically what I would end up studying in my first year of university.
Exactly.
Since I'm a Canadian based in the US, I just wanted to ask you about your presence in the United States market. I personally have bought RCM books for my kids.
So RCM has had a presence in the U.S. for a very long time. I think we probably do about between 55 and 60,000 exams a year, for example, and about 7 or 8, maybe 9,000 of those come from the U.S. So it's a pretty good foothold. There are pockets within the U.S. that are very devoted to the RCM curriculum. Southern California in particular is a really, really strong base for us. Pockets in Texas, Illinois, Massachusetts, tri-state area, Florida. Yeah, a lot of really, really terrific teachers who have found out about the Royal Conservatory of Music. We have these incredible events over the course of an academic year called Celebrations of Excellence. And so we have basically the gold medalists, those who have scored the highest on their exams in Canada, all come to the RCM, to Toronto, and do a showcase concert, usually in the fall. But we do the same thing for kids who have taken the exams in the US. and they actually come to Carnegie Hall, and we do a showcase concert at Carnegie Hall every January, which is terrific. And it's been interesting getting to know those students and their families. Many of them have a Canadian connection, right? So maybe their parents were Canadian, they grew up in Canada, now they're living in the US, and of course they were going to study the RCM. But others found out about it through their teachers. So many teachers have found out about the curriculum and the method and just are so devoted to it because it's so good, right? It encompasses all the things that we've actually been talking about. It's been really wonderful to see really that awareness growing in the US about what the RCM can do for early music study and beyond. And I think as a result of that, I suppose, and we need to do a better job. I mean, part of what my mandate is to really work on the brand of the conservatory, right? So that a student studying the piano curriculum in Orange County, California, knows that when they graduate from high school, there is a school in Toronto called the Glenn Gould School that's part of the Royal Conservatory of Music that they could apply to and come study piano, right? I don't think there are many Americans, certainly, who know that there's that connection. And in fact, I don't even know if all Canadians understand that studying the curriculum in Red Deer is something that is connected to a campus in Toronto. And in fact, there was a really great interview in the New York Times recently with Eugene Levy, and he was talking about his 5 favorite things in Toronto. And one of them was Kerner Hall, and really wonderful photo of Kerner Hall. And of course, the comments in the digital online version were so fantastic. One person wrote in, I think from Alberta or maybe BC, saying, wow, I went through my books and I got grade 8 and I never knew that the Royal Conservatory was an actual building and a school in Toronto. So what can we do, right? What can we do to really inform and educate people about what this institution really is, right? Yeah. From the books and the exams, but also to the schools that we have here and the incredible concert stage that we have here in our midst as well.
Well, the good news is that you have the product and you have the backing. Right. And so then you're just looking for a strategy. So,
oh, sure. Yeah.
That's a better position to be in than most.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's so lucky to have everything that's gone on here for 135 years and even over the past 33 years, right? Peter's vision, its separation from the University of Toronto and what's been built since that time. It's kind of nothing short of a miracle, to be honest, right? To create a degree program, to create a really high-end program for kids 8 to 18 years old from all over the GTA, to build Kerner Hall. I mean, it's a very, very incredible institution. And I just feel so lucky to be a part of it.
Can I ask what you do when you're not president doing your job?
Oh, man, I wish I didn't have to think so hard about it. Yeah, I have 2 boys and an incredible wife, and I do love spending time with them. We try and travel as much as we can. We're actually off to Chile next week to see my wife's family in South America, which is really, really exciting. First time for one of my sons to go. So travel has always been a huge part of my upbringing, having grown up in Asia and seeing the world at a very young age. You kind of get the bug. And I think my kids got it to a degree when we were living in China, starting in 2017 and up until COVID. We were just traveling and seeing just the most incredible places. And so I think travel will always be an important part of our family. And if we can find the time to do it, it obviously takes up a lot of time. Yeah. It takes you out of the office when you're traveling. I love baseball, not going to lie. I'm a rabid baseball fan. And I am a Yankee fan, although I have numerous, no, hold on. I have numerous Jays hats and have gone to numerous games and just love the spirit and the culture of baseball in Toronto and throughout Canada. And it's, very important board member here on our board is got very deep ties to the Jays. And so, yeah, the Jays just love the experience of going to see that team play. And hopefully they do better this year than they did last year. And I love political science. I just, having grown up overseas and having been an Asian studies major and having worked abroad, having now in Canada, and just the elections and politics and all of that stuff. I mean, today's election day here in Toronto, exciting. But I've always just been very fascinated with government and politics and things like that. So I spend a lot of time reading about that as well. Foreign policy, that kind of stuff.
Well, it's certainly an interesting time for that.
Is it ever?
I won't comment.
Is it ever? Bit of kryptonite.
Yeah. Thanks for being on the podcast and for having this conversation. And I hope to connect with you more.
Oh, Lizzie, thanks so much. This has been super fun. Thanks for doing this. It's been a pleasure to watch your other episodes, and I hope to work with you again soon.